So in earlier tutorials, we got the lamp instance, the base lamp instance running, and now we're going to get into the unique steps just for Fusion Ticket. So I'm going to bring up two terminals here. The right one I'm going to use for the actual remoting into the CentOS installation, and the left one will be on the Mac side. So over here on the Mac side, that's where I happen to have my zip file with the source code in it. Uh, so this is what I have to copy over to the Linux install. You can get your source code over there anyway, any way comfortable for you. I'm just happen to be using SCP, which is an SSH copy. This happens to be the 7.1 beta donor version. Copying it from my local Mac over to home, the home directory on the Linux side. Sorry, I'm such a terrible typer. And back over on the Linux side, it should be there in our home directory. Now we want to copy unzip this to the doc root of Apache. So here we are in the Apache directory. Make a Fusion directory. Don't make the mistake I do. For some reason, this zip file assumes you're already in a Fusion subdirectory. I've kind of polluted a bunch of parent directories by unzipping it directly into the parent directory. Make sure you make a Fusion subdirectory first. Get in there and then unzip the zip file. So here we are. This is the Fusion core directly from the install. I like to run virtual Apache virtual hosts. It's a concept of having multiple instances of a web server running on a single web server. And you can configure that in the httpd conf directories. All kinds of good stuff in here about configuring Apache, but the item of interest is all the way down the bottom, so I'm going to Shift G down to the bottom, and there's this section for virtual hosts. I like to set it up with name-based virtual hosting. So if you come in with hostname a.com, it'll run this web page. If you come in with b.com, it'll run that web page. So here I'm going to configure a virtual host for TIX. The domain I tend to be working with a lot. I own a domain called BBTV Network. So I'm going to create a server, like a web page for tix.bbtvnetwork.com. It's just an email. I happen to have an email set up for info@bbtvnetwork.com. The doc root is where the actual HTML root is. We just unzipped it in var www fusion. And the server name is, so when you hit Apache with this server name, it's going to go to that doc root. So if we come in with tix.bbtvnetwork, it's going to go look at the Fusion install. Once again, my terrible typing. Each virtual instance can have its own log files. So it's just this is the section that you're going to want to repeat for every virtual host you're running. And I did correct that typo on the .com, but so we are restarting the web server. Now, back on the Mac side, uh, this is a case where the SSH config file for defining that IP address was nice for SSH and SCP, but now that I'm using a web browser, I need to set up my Etsy host file so that it recognizes I'm never going to remember that IP address. So just check real quick the IP address with ifconfig, and I'm going to put an entry in here. I already had that CentOS entry in my Mac Etsy host file. Now I'm going to add tix.bbtvnetwork.com. So let's bring up a browser. We already had the we already had the instance of the PHP myadmin. Now we're going to CentOS and tix.bbtvnetwork.com, and they both point to this install me now, which is the first page of Fusion. Fusion install requires that you have a database set up. I'm going to create a user with its own database called Fusion. Username Fusion. This is just my test install, so I'm going to go pretty unsecure here with Fusion as the username, Fusion as the password, and Fusion as the database that it's going to create. Down here, tell it to create a new database with that user and give them all permissions. And now we have a database called Fusion and a user called Fusion. It's empty at the moment, but this is what the Fusion installer is going to install into when it does its install. So we are on the verge of doing the install. I want to go back and check the prerequisites. Make sure I like to be root when I do this. Get to the Fusion root directory, go look at the prerequisites on the installation. And I've done this so many times, I like to squirrel it away separately so I can copy and paste it in. So at this point, I'm just going to run a quick paste, which is going to run those prerequisites for me. Permissions on the directories, create the temp directory, and so forth. And at that point, we can run the install me script. Remember, I created a Fusion database with a Fusion user and a Fusion password. Again, don't do this if you're running on an operational server. Do a full install. I'm not going to do the demo data. You're welcome to if you want. Admin. A lot of the demos, you see people creating a user demo with a password demo. I'm not going to have that be my default admin user. I'm going to create a separate admin user for Fusion, called Fusion with a password of Fusion. Once again, unsecure. Then I can always add the demo user later if I want to. But this is going to be the username login for the administrator. We're going to talk more about this secure connection later. I ran into some problems when I did that save root URL in init config. I recommend not checking that box. And we already set up email, so I'm going to use the send mail to send email. Not going to register at this point. I've done this so many times. Those poor developers have my registration. So here we are. We are installed and ready to go to the 3 different sub pages. But at this point, I wanted to dive in a little bit more about the secure SSH, or not the secure SSH, the secure web connections. I like to force all of my connections directly to HTTPS. And one way to do that is to create a rewrite rule in your htaccess file. So these top lines here, what it says is anytime a user comes in and hits this with HTTP, I automatically redirect them to the HTTPS version of it. So drop this into the root directory and the pos directory. So now you can see I'm unsecure. I needed to create a self-signed certificate. So there's instructions about creating a self-signed certificate and putting it into the Apache configuration. Remember we created a virtual host for ticks? Well, here it is on the left, that virtual host we created. We also need to create a separate virtual host for the secure version, and that is in the ssl.conf file. So we're getting ready to set up this secure key, or the certificate that we created so we can go with secure web. A couple items in here. The instructions talk about creating a self-signed certificate. Up top here, this virtual host is the secure virtual host. Same lines on the right as we had on the left. Just copied those right over. Again, I already corrected that typo. And then you need to set up the certificates that we created with our self-signed certificate. And restart Apache. I already restarted it, so I'm not gonna restart it right here, but this is what you would do: service restart Apache. So at this point, we now have the ability to go secure. Notice up here in the left, I'm not secure at the moment, but if I go to the admin screen, it tries to go secure. Now, because this is a self-signed certificate, I need to create an exception. This is okay for development, but you don't want your consumers, your customers seeing this. So you can see it switched over directly to the HTTPS. It's a self-signed certificate by me, but it lets us do some more debugging. We already created the Fusion admin, so let's log in. And here we are at the admin screen, getting ready to do some events.